The silver vessel descended through Proxima B's amber-tinged atmosphere, its hull reflecting the dual suns that dominated the sky. Inside, Talia Nix pressed her six-fingered hand against the viewing portal, her luminescent blue skin casting a soft glow in the dimmed cabin. Behind her, contained in 3 suspended animation pods, her children slept peacefully, unaware they were about to meet the being who might become their new guardian. Approaching human settlement, announced the ship's AI. Atmospheric composition within Arcturian tolerance. Gravitational variance, minimal. Talia nodded, adjusting the translator embedded beneath the delicate gill-like structures on her neck. The journey from Lumina had taken 47 Earth days, and every moment had been filled with doubt and hope in equal measure. Since Orion's death during the crystalline plague, she had searched countless star systems for a suitable partner to help raise their children. Arcturian culture demanded a 2-parent household, and without a second guardian, her family would face exile to the outer colonies. Why humans? Her sister had asked before Talia departed. Their lifespans are so brief, their customs primitive. But Talia had studied Earth transmissions for years. Humans possessed something rare in the evolved species of the galaxy, adaptability and emotional resilience. They formed attachments quickly, protected fiercely what they considered theirs. These were the qualities her children would need in a guardian. The landing pad approached, a circular platform amid a sprawling complex of domes and tunnels carved into the rusty landscape. Human settlements were always practical rather than beautiful, function over form, survival over aesthetics. So different from the crystalline spires of Lumina. Initiating landing sequence, the AI intoned as Talia gathered her ceremonial robes around her slender frame. First impressions mattered in human culture. The ship settled with a gentle hiss, and Talia checked the stasis pods one last time. 8-cycle Elier, 5-cycle Vesta, and infant Chorus, all still in deep sleep, their skin pulsing with the bioluminescent patterns that revealed their healthy life signs. She would wake them only after she had secured a potential guardian. The airlock cycled open, and Talia stepped onto Proxima B for the first time. Mason Evans was having a spectacularly bad day even before the alien ship arrived. 2 terraforming drones had malfunctioned, a water reclamation unit had sprung a leak, and the botanists were complaining about soil pH levels again. 5 years on this dust ball of a planet, and each day seemed determined to be worse than the last. Captain Evans, his comm unit chirped. Unscheduled vessel approaching landing pad C. Arcturian registry. Mason sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, now streaked with premature gray at 38. Arcturians? This far from the Coalition territories? Must be lost. Negative, sir. They're requesting specific landing clearance. For you, specifically. That stopped him cold. In 15 years of space service, 10 with Earth's military and 5 as chief engineer at this outpost, he'd never encountered an Arcturian, much less one asking for him by name. Clearance granted. I'll be there in 5. By the time Mason reached the landing pad, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Arcturians were rare visitors to human settlements, their crystalline technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. Their bioengineered ships were objects of fascination among human engineers. The vessel before him was smaller than he expected, perhaps a personal transport rather than a diplomatic craft. As the entry ramp extended, Mason straightened his utilitarian uniform and stepped forward as protocol demanded. The figure that emerged left him momentarily speechless. Tall and willowy, with skin the color of Earth's oceans and eyes like polished silver. A female, he thought, though Arcturian gender distinctions were notoriously difficult for humans to discern. Her long, flowing robes shimmered with embedded crystals that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Captain Mason Evans, she said, her translator providing perfect English with just a hint of musical resonance. I am Talia Nix of House Lumina, Third Sphere. I have traveled far to find you. Mason swallowed hard. Welcome to Proxima B Outpost, Ambassador Nix. Though I'm afraid there must be some mistake. I'm just the engineering chief here, not a diplomatic officer. Her silver eyes studied him with unsettling intensity. There is no mistake, Captain. I have researched extensively. You are precisely who I seek. She paused, glancing at the curious onlookers. Perhaps we might speak privately. What I propose concerns matters of family. Family? Mason repeated, confusion evident in his voice. Talia's expression remained serene, but her skin pulsed briefly with patterns that his translator couldn't interpret. Yes, Captain Evans. I have come to ask if you would consider becoming my husband and the guardian of my children. Mason stared at Talia Nix, certain he had misheard or the translator had malfunctioned. The Arcturian stood before him with perfect poise, seemingly unaware of the bombshell she had just dropped. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private, he managed, gesturing toward the administration dome. Around them, the gathered humans whispered among themselves. Talia followed him silently, her movements fluid and graceful despite Proxima B's slightly higher gravity than her homeworld. Mason led her to his office, a utilitarian space with stark lighting and minimal decoration save for a small hologram of Earth's Pacific Ocean on his desk. Please, he said, indicating a chair designed for human proportions that looked uncomfortably small for her tall frame. Talia adjusted her robes and sat with remarkable elegance. I understand this is unexpected, she began, her translator conveying the musical quality of her native speech. But Arcturians do not waste time with indirection when matters of family are concerned. Mason leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Let's back up. You traveled 40-something light years to ask me, a complete stranger, to marry you and adopt your children? Why me? Why a human at all? Talia's skin rippled with luminescent patterns that seemed to indicate thoughtfulness. You are not a complete stranger to me, Captain Evans. I have studied your records extensively. Your military service. Your work in crisis zones. Your decision to leave Earth after losing your sister in the Singapore flooding. Mason tensed. How did you? Arcturians have access to most coalition databases. But more importantly, I have observed your work here. You built this outpost from barren rock. You protected your team during the methane pocket explosion last year. You show patience with the younger engineers. You are. She searched for the right word, nurturing, despite your attempts to appear otherwise. Research is one thing. But marriage? Adoption? These aren't small commitments on Earth. Nor on Lumina, Talia replied, her silver eyes unblinking. Perhaps I should explain our situation more clearly. She produced a small crystal from her robes and placed it on the desk. It projected a three-dimensional image of a magnificent crystalline city, towers spiraling toward an azure sky. This was our home, before the crystalline plague. My bond partner, Orion, was a genetic architect. When the plague struck, he worked to find a cure. Her voice remained steady, but the light patterns on her skin dimmed noticeably. He succeeded, but too late to save himself. Our laws and biology require 2 guardians for children. Without a second guardian, we face exile to the outer colonies. The crystal's image shifted to show 3 small Arcturians, 2 clearly children and 1 an infant. Their skin showed patterns similar to Talia's but with unique variations. These are my children, Elier, Vesta, and Chorus. They are aboard my ship now, in suspended animation. They have already lost 1 parent. I will not let them lose their home as well. Mason studied the holographic children, feeling a strange tug of empathy despite the alienness of their appearance. But why not find another Arcturian? The plague left few survivors of compatible genetic lineage. And those who remain. She hesitated. They would accept my children as obligation, not with genuine care. I studied many species before choosing humans, specifically, before choosing you. And what exactly would this arrangement involve? Mason asked, still struggling to process the situation. A bonding ceremony, recognized by both our worlds. You would help raise my children, teach them human ways alongside Arcturian traditions. We would live together as a family unit. And us? You and me? Talia's skin pulsed briefly with a pattern he couldn't interpret. Bond partnerships typically include physical and emotional intimacy, though I understand human practices may differ. I am open to such connection, if mutual compatibility exists. Mason ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. I can't just. A sharp knock interrupted them as Dr. Helena Frost, the outpost's chief medical officer, entered without waiting for a response. Sorry to interrupt, but I heard we had an Arcturian visitor and, she stopped, eyes widening at the sight of Talia. Oh. Hello. This is Talia Nix, Mason said, grateful for the interruption. She's visiting. Helena approached with undisguised fascination. I've never had the opportunity to meet an Arcturian before. Your bioluminescent patterns, are they a form of communication? Among other functions, Talia replied politely. They express emotional states, health conditions, and can supplement verbal communication. Fascinating. I'd love to learn more about your physiology if you're willing. Helena's enthusiasm was palpable. Mason cleared his throat. Dr. Frost, can you arrange guest quarters for Talia? She'll be staying, for a while. Of course, Helena replied, still staring at Talia with scientific curiosity. As Helena led Talia away, the Arcturian looked back at Mason. Consider my proposal, Captain. Take whatever time you need. But know that I chose you with great care. I believe you are what my children need, what I need. Mason watched them leave, his mind reeling. Through the viewing port of his office, he could see Talia's silver ship gleaming in the amber sunlight. Somewhere inside were 3 alien children, waiting to meet the human who might become their new father. What the hell have I gotten myself into? He whispered to the empty room. 3 days after Talia's shocking proposal, Mason found himself approaching her ship with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He had spent those days researching Arcturian culture, family structures, and biological needs, when he wasn't fielding endless questions from the outpost staff about their unusual visitor. The ship's entry ramp extended as he approached, as though anticipating his arrival. Inside, the organic architecture was unlike any human vessel he'd encountered. The walls pulsed with subtle light patterns, and the air carried a faint scent of something like cinnamon and ozone. Captain Evans, Talia greeted him, emerging from a corridor. She had exchanged her formal robes for simpler attire that reminded him of a fitted jumpsuit, though the material shimmered with embedded crystalline structures. You have decided to meet them? Mason nodded. I still haven't made any decisions about your proposal. But I should at least meet the children involved. Talia's skin brightened visibly. This is wise. Please, follow me. She led him deeper into the ship, to a circular chamber where 3 stasis pods were arranged. 2 had been opened, but the smallest remained sealed. Elier and Vesta are awake and waiting. Chorus remains in stasis, as the transition must be more carefully managed for infants. As if on cue, 2 small Arcturians emerged from behind a partition. The taller one, Elier, Mason presumed, had skin patterns that pulsed with rapid, nervous energy. The smaller one, Vesta, partially hid behind her brother. Children, Talia said in English, then added something in her native language that sounded like musical chimes. This is Captain Mason Evans. He is the human I told you about. Elier stepped forward, silver eyes studying Mason with unsettling intensity. You have fur on your face, he said in surprisingly clear English. Mason touched his stubbled jaw. It's called a beard. Human males grow them. Can I touch it? Elier asked. Before Mason could answer, the boy's six-fingered hand was already reaching up. Mason knelt to allow the curious touch. Elier's fingers were cool and slightly firmer than human skin, with a subtle texture like polished stone. It's prickly, Elier announced, fascinated. Vesta, emboldened by her brother's approach, emerged from hiding. Are you going to be our new father guardian? She asked, her voice higher and more melodic than Elier's. Mason glanced at Talia, who watched the interaction with careful attention. I don't know yet. Your mother and I are still discussing it. But you are considering it, Talia clarified, or you would not be here. Mason couldn't deny the logic. Instead, he focused on the children. How old are you two? I am 8 cycles, Elier said proudly. Vesta is 5. Cycles are similar to Earth years, Talia explained. Though our physical and cognitive development follows a different pattern than humans. Vesta approached Mason now, studying him with the same intensity as her brother. Mother says you build things and fix machines. That's right, Mason replied, surprised by how comfortable he felt speaking with these alien children. I'm an engineer. Can you show us? Elier asked excitedly. We brought broken things to fix. Talia made a sound that Mason's translator didn't catch, perhaps a laugh or expression of amusement. They prepared for your visit, she explained. For the next hour, Mason sat with the children, examining their collection of broken things, mostly small Arcturian devices that were simply deactivated rather than damaged. He showed them how he would approach diagnosing problems, using his portable toolkit to demonstrate basic engineering principles. To his surprise, the children were extraordinarily quick to understand, asking insightful questions that belied their young ages. Elier had a natural aptitude for mechanical concepts, while Vesta showed more interest in the theoretical aspects. Would you like to see Chorus now? Talia asked, and the impromptu engineering lesson concluded. Mason followed her to the sealed stasis pod, where the infant Arcturian floated in a luminescent fluid. Chorus was tiny, perhaps the size of a human 6-month-old, with skin patterns that pulsed in slow, soothing rhythms. He's beautiful, Mason said, surprised by the sincerity of his words. He is just beginning to develop his unique patterns, Talia explained, her fingers touching the transparent surface of the pod. Children are our greatest treasures. To raise them alone is considered. She paused, searching for the right word. Not merely difficult, but harmful. They need diverse influences, varied perspectives. Mason watched the sleeping infant, feeling an unexpected tug of protectiveness. On Earth, single parents raise children all the time. And admirably so, Talia acknowledged. But Arcturians are different. Our neural development depends on the empathic bonding with two distinct consciousnesses. Without it, certain cognitive pathways never form correctly. The technical explanation somehow made the situation more real to Mason than all the cultural reasons she had given before. This wasn't just about Arcturian traditions or laws, it was about biological necessity. As they prepared to leave the ship, Elier and Vesta insisted on accompanying them back to the outpost. Talia agreed, and soon they were walking across the landing pad, the two Arcturian children marveling at the rusty landscape of Proxima b. The sky is the wrong color, Vesta observed, looking up at the amber-tinged atmosphere. Different planets have different atmospheres, Mason explained. That changes the way light filters through. Like our emotion filters, Elier said, nodding with understanding. Different patterns show different feelings. Mason glanced at Talia, who was watching her children with a complex pattern of lights rippling across her skin. When she noticed his gaze, she met his eyes with an intensity that sent an unexpected warmth through him. Your children are remarkable, he said quietly. They are, she agreed. And they seem drawn to you already. Later that night, after the children had returned to the ship for their rest cycle, Talia joined Mason on the observation deck of the main dome. The twin suns of Proxima Centauri were setting, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. "You're good with them," Talia said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Better than I anticipated." "I had a younger sister," Mason replied, surprised by how easily the personal admission came. "I helped raise her after our parents died." "The sister you lost," Talia said softly. Mason nodded, turning to face her. "How does this bond partnership work, exactly? On the emotional level, I mean." Talia's skin pulsed with a pattern he was beginning to recognize as thoughtfulness. "It begins as a practical arrangement, but typically grows into something deeper. Shared purpose creates shared connection. And physical compatibility? Between different species?" Her patterns shifted to something new, warmer, more intense. "Arcturians are adaptable. We can harmonize with compatible species." The air between them seemed to charge with a subtle energy. Mason found himself stepping closer, drawn by a curiosity that wasn't entirely scientific. "I would need to know if that aspect is viable before making any decisions," he said, his voice lower than he intended. Talia studied him, her silver eyes reflecting the sunset. Then, with deliberate slowness, she extended her six-fingered hand. Mason took it, surprised by the pleasant warmth and slight vibration he felt at the contact. "Compatibility can be tested," she said simply. Their first kiss was tentative, an exploration of alien territory for both. Her lips were cooler than a human's but softer than he expected, and the contact sent a pleasant tingling sensation across his skin. When they parted, her entire body was aglow with pulsing patterns that needed no translation. "It seems," Talia whispered, "that this aspect of bond partnership would not be problematic." Mason found himself smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. "No," he agreed, "not problematic at all." 3 weeks after Talia's arrival, Mason had fallen into an unexpected routine. His days were split between his duties at the outpost and time spent with Talia and her children. Elier had become his shadow, fascinated by engineering work, while Vesta had developed a friendship with Dr. Helena Frost, absorbing medical knowledge with remarkable speed. Even baby Chorus had emerged from stasis, now kept in a specialized environmental cradle that Talia had brought from her homeworld. The infant Arcturian seemed especially responsive to Mason's voice, his skin lighting up with excited patterns whenever the human approached. "He recognizes your neural signature," Talia explained as they stood over the cradle one evening. "It's a promising sign." Mason reached in to touch the infant's hand, smiling as tiny six-fingered appendages grasped his thumb. "He's strong. He will be stronger with 2 guardians," Talia said pointedly. The comment hung in the air between them. Though their physical compatibility had proven to be better than either had anticipated, their intimate encounters becoming increasingly frequent and satisfying, Mason still hesitated to commit to the full bond partnership. "I need more time," he said, not for the first time. Talia inclined her head in acceptance, though her skin patterns betrayed her disappointment. "Time is a luxury we have less of than you might think. The Arcturian Council has requested my return within 60 days. Before Mason could respond, his communication unit chimed urgently. "Captain Evans, report to control immediately. Level 1 emergency protocol initiated." Mason was already moving. "Stay here," he told Talia. "Keep the children inside the ship." The control center was in organized chaos when he arrived. Technicians moved between stations with urgent purpose while the main display showed a massive solar storm approaching from Proxima Centauri. "Report," Mason demanded, stepping to the central console. "Class X solar eruption, sir," reported Aisha Karim, the senior astrophysicist. "Biggest we've ever recorded in this system." Radiation levels will exceed safety parameters for at least 72 hours. How long until it hits? 18 hours. We're already initiating evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. Mason studied the data scrolling across the screens. The outpost's shielding was designed to withstand ordinary solar activity, but nothing of this magnitude. Start transferring critical research data to the bunker servers. Prepare the underground shelters. Sir, Aisha said hesitantly, the shelters aren't rated for this level of radiation, not for extended periods. We need to evacuate everyone to the orbital station. Mason knew she was right. The orbital platform 30,000 kilometers above Proxima b was their only safe haven. How many shuttles do we have ready? 4, sir. Enough for essential personnel and critical equipment. That's not enough for everyone, Mason said, feeling the weight of command settling heavily on his shoulders. Prepare all available vessels. We'll need to make multiple trips. As the evacuation plans formed, Mason's thoughts turned to Talia and her children. Their biology was different. Would they be more or less susceptible to the radiation? He needed to consult with Helena. He found the doctor in the medical bay, already preparing emergency supplies. Helena, I need to know if Arcturians can withstand higher radiation levels than humans. Helena looked up from her work, expression grim. Actually, it's the opposite. Their cellular structure is more susceptible to radiation damage. Their ship should offer some protection, but if they're caught in the full brunt of the storm. She didn't need to finish the thought. Mason was already heading for the landing pad when the first tremor shook the outpost. Not from the storm, that was still hours away, but from the planet itself. Evans to control. What was that? Seismic activity, sir, came the response. The solar emissions are already affecting the planet's magnetic field. It's destabilizing the crust near the northern ridge. Another tremor, stronger this time, sent Mason staggering against a wall. This wasn't in any of their emergency scenarios. A combined solar and seismic event could tear the outpost apart before the storm even hit. By the time he reached Talia's ship, chaos had erupted across the landing pad. Personnel were rushing to prepare shuttles while equipment was being loaded for emergency transport. The ground continued to shake intermittently. Inside the ship, he found Talia calmly securing equipment while Elier and Vesta helped by gathering their belongings. We need to evacuate, Mason said without preamble. Massive solar storm incoming, and the planet's becoming unstable. Talia nodded, unsurprised. We detected the emissions shortly after you left. I've been preparing the ship for departure. You're leaving? The question came out more sharply than he intended. Not without discussing it with you, she replied, her skin patterns conveying concern. But my ship can reach your orbital station safely. Relief flooded through Mason. Of course, her ship was far more advanced than their shuttles. Can you take additional passengers? We don't have enough shuttles for everyone. Yes, we can accommodate at least 20 of your people. Mason's communication unit chimed again. Captain, we have a situation. The seismic activity has damaged Shuttle Bay 2. We just lost 2 shuttles. The situation had just gone from bad to desperate. Understood. I've secured alternative transport for 20 personnel. Send the priority list to my unit. Just as he finished speaking, Talia let out a sudden cry. Mason turned to see her rushing to Chorus's cradle. The infant's skin was flashing with erratic patterns, and his tiny body was convulsing. What's happening? Mason asked, hurrying to her side. Radiation sensitivity, Talia said, her voice tight with fear. His protective systems aren't fully developed. Even these preliminary emissions are affecting him. Can your medical tech help him? Not alone. Talia looked up, her silver eyes wide with fear. He needs a dual-system treatment, Arcturian biological stabilizers and human medical compounds to reinforce his cellular structure. Mason didn't hesitate. Helena can help. We'll take him to the medical bay. As they rushed through the increasingly chaotic outpost, carrying the specialized cradle between them, Mason made a series of rapid-fire decisions via his comm unit. The evacuation plans shifted, personnel assignments changed, and shuttle manifest priorities were reorganized, all while the ground continued to shake beneath them. In the medical bay, Helena was already overwhelmed with minor injuries from the tremors. But one look at the convulsing infant and she cleared a treatment area. "What do you need from me?" she asked Talia. "Human stem cell derivatives," Talia explained quickly. "They can be synthesized to support his failing systems until I can administer the Arcturian treatments." For the next hour, as the outpost shuddered around them and evacuation alarms blared, the three worked desperately to stabilize Chorus. Mason assisted both women, following their instructions precisely while continuing to coordinate the evacuation via his comm unit. Finally, the infant's erratic patterns began to stabilize. "It's working," Talia said, her relief evident in both her voice and the brightening patterns across her skin. "But he'll need continual treatment during the journey to the orbital station." "I'll come with you," Helena said, already gathering the necessary medications. "I need to monitor the human compound interactions." Another violent tremor shook the medical bay, sending equipment crashing to the floor. "We need to go now," Mason ordered. "The first shuttles are already launching." As they made their way back to the landing pad, carrying Chorus's cradle and essential medical supplies, Mason found himself making the decision he'd been avoiding for weeks. Watching Talia's fierce protection of her child, witnessing her brilliant cooperation with Helena to save him, and feeling his own desperate fear for the infant's safety, it all crystallized into a moment of clarity. This was already his family. The bond partnership Talia had proposed would simply formalize what he already felt. On the landing pad, as Talia's ship prepared for emergency launch, Mason pulled her aside. "If the offer still stands," he said, "I accept. All of it. The bond partnership, guardianship of the children, everything." Talia's skin erupted in brilliant patterns of joy, visible even amidst the chaos of the evacuation. "You choose this moment to decide?" "Nothing like a crisis to clarify what matters," Mason replied with a grim smile. As they boarded the ship with Helena, Elier, Vesta, and the stabilized Chorus, along with 20 essential outpost personnel, Mason felt a strange sense of rightness despite the danger surrounding them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The orbital station above Proxima b was never designed to accommodate 300 people for extended periods, but somehow they made it work. Crews shared sleeping quarters in shifts, the hydroponics labs were converted to produce more food, and engineers worked around the clock to expand life support capabilities. From the observation deck, Mason watched the fierce solar storm rage against the planet below. The outpost's emergency shielding had failed during the third day of the event, and much of their ground-based equipment was now irreparably damaged. "Quite a view," came Talia's voice as she joined him. "Not the way I expected my posting here to end," Mason replied, turning to her. "How's Chorus?" "Recovering well. Helena says he's responding better than expected to the combined treatment." She stood beside him, her tall frame now a familiar, comforting presence. "The children are asking when we'll perform the bonding ceremony." Mason smiled. In the 3 weeks since their evacuation to the orbital station, preparations for the Arcturian bonding ritual had become something of a communal project. The human crew, facing an uncertain future as they waited for rescue vessels from Earth, had embraced the distraction of planning an interspecies wedding. "Helena says she's finished synthesizing the bonding compounds," Mason said. "And apparently Aisha and her team have created some approximation of traditional Arcturian decorations for the ceremony." "I've noticed," Talia said, a ripple of amusement crossing her skin. "They're enthusiastic, if not entirely accurate." From behind them came the sound of small, quick footsteps. They turned to see Elier and Vesta approaching, their skin patterns bright with excitement. Father-to-be, Elier called, his new name for Mason since the announcement of their bonding. The Earth vessels have been detected. 3 ships, approaching from the outer system. The news sent a ripple of emotion through Mason. The rescue fleet from Earth had arrived sooner than expected. How long until they reach us? Approximately 48 Earth hours, Vesta supplied, her grasp of human time measurements now flawless. Will we still have the ceremony before they arrive? Of course, Talia assured her. Nothing will delay our bonding. Later that day, Mason sat with Helena in the station's small medical lab, watching as she prepared the last elements needed for the ceremony. You know, she said, carefully measuring a luminescent compound into a vial, when you signed on as chief engineer, I bet marrying an alien and adopting her children wasn't in the job description. Mason laughed. Definitely not. But then, neither was evacuate entire outpost due to catastrophic solar event. Helena sealed the vial and added it to a collection of similar containers. The bonding ritual is fascinating from a medical perspective. The compounds create a temporary biochemical bridge between your nervous systems, allowing you to experience each other's emotions directly. Talia explained it as seeing with the other's inner light, Mason said. Poetic, Helena nodded. And accurate. You'll essentially share consciousness for the duration of the ritual. She hesitated, then added, Are you ready for that? It's a level of intimacy beyond anything humans typically experience. Mason considered the question seriously. Over the past weeks, his relationship with Talia had deepened in ways he hadn't thought possible. Their physical intimacy had evolved into something transcendent, their biological differences creating unexpected harmonies rather than obstacles. And his connection to the children had become undeniably paternal. I'm ready, he said simply. The ceremony took place the following evening in the station's largest common area, transformed by the crew into a reasonable facsimile of an Arcturian ceremonial chamber. Crystalline structures created from repurposed equipment caught and refracted light in patterns reminiscent of Lumina's architecture. The entire station's complement attended, humans crowding the space to witness this historic interspecies bonding. Mason wore a ceremonial robe that Talia had brought from her homeworld, modified to fit his human proportions. It felt surprisingly comfortable, the crystalline fibers adapting to his body temperature and movements. Elier and Vesta entered first, their skin glowing with formal patterns that Talia had helped them practice for days. They carried small crystalline vessels containing the bonding compounds, their solemn expressions belied by the excited patterns rippling just beneath the formal display on their skin. Then came Helena, carrying Chorus. The infant had fully recovered, his skin patterns now strong and vibrant. As the designated medical guardian, Helena would monitor the bonding process and care for Chorus during the ceremony. Finally, Talia appeared. Her ceremonial attire was stunning, a flowing ensemble that seemed to capture and amplify light, making her entire form glow with ethereal beauty. Her skin displayed patterns Mason had never seen before, complex and mesmerizing. The ceremony itself was conducted in both English and the musical Arcturian language. Talia had taught Mason the essential responses, which he delivered with careful precision. The crew watched in fascinated silence as the ancient ritual unfolded, bridging not just 2 individuals but 2 vastly different species and cultures. When the time came for the neural bonding, Elier and Vesta approached with the crystalline vessels. The compounds within, part biological, part technological, would temporarily synchronize their nervous systems, allowing each to experience the other's consciousness directly. They drank simultaneously, the luminescent liquid warm and slightly effervescent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Mason felt a tingling sensation that started at the base of his skull and spread throughout his body. The world around him shifted, colors intensifying and new spectrums becoming visible. He could suddenly perceive the emotional patterns in the air, the fascination and joy of the watching humans, the solemn ceremony of the moment, and most vividly, Talia's presence before him. Her consciousness touched his like a warm wave, distinct yet harmonious. He could feel her thoughts, not as words but as emotions and images. Her grief for Orion, her fierce love for her children, her initial uncertainty about seeking a human partner, and now her joy at finding connection with Mason. In turn, he knew she was experiencing his mind, his loneliness since losing his sister, his dedication to his work, his initial skepticism about her proposal, and his growing love for her and the children. Nothing was hidden, everything was shared in perfect understanding. When the neural connection reached its peak, they spoke the final vows in unison, he in Arcturian, she in English, both understanding each other perfectly in that moment. As the bonding compounds began to fade, returning them to their separate consciousnesses, Mason felt a permanent change had occurred. Something of Talia remained with him, a faint echo of their shared moment that he knew would never completely disappear. The station erupted in applause as they were pronounced bond partners according to both Arcturian and human custom. Elier and Vesta rushed forward to embrace them both, their skin patterns blazing with joy. Helena approached with Chorus, who reached out with tiny six-fingered hands toward Mason. As he took the infant, Chorus's skin lit up with patterns that perfectly matched a section of Mason's ceremonial robe, a recognition of their new familial bond. 2 days later, the rescue fleet from Earth arrived. The evacuation of the orbital station began immediately, with plans to establish a new outpost on a more stable planet in the Proxima system. The damaged outpost below would be salvaged for whatever equipment had survived the storm. As they prepared to board the Earth vessel that would take them home, Mason found himself facing a moment of reflection. Just months ago, he had been a solitary engineer on a remote outpost, nursing old wounds and avoiding deep connections. Now he stood with a bond partner and 3 children who looked to him for guidance and protection. Having second thoughts? Talia asked, sensing his contemplative mood. Just the opposite, Mason replied. I was thinking about how different my life is now. Better, but different. Life should evolve, Talia said, her hand finding his. Static things don't grow. The children joined them, Elier carrying Chorus while Vesta clutched a data pad containing information about Earth that she had been studying obsessively. Will humans stare at us? Vesta asked, a nervous pattern briefly crossing her skin. Probably, Mason admitted honestly. But they'll learn, just like I did. And you'll have me to help navigate human customs. And Mother will help you navigate Arcturian ones, Elier added with the certainty of a child who had already accepted their new family configuration. As they boarded the vessel that would take them to Earth, Mason knew challenges awaited them. They would be the first official Arcturian human family, pioneers of a new kind of interspecies relationship. There would be cultural misunderstandings, biological complications, and undoubtedly some opposition from traditionalists on both worlds. But looking at Talia, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight, her skin patterns conveying the same determined hope he felt, Mason knew they would face whatever came together. The bond they shared transcended the biological and cultural differences between them, creating something new and stronger than either could have achieved alone. Ready for our next adventure? He asked as the ship's airlock sealed behind them. Talia's skin glowed with a pattern he now recognized as love. With you and the children? Always. The Earth vessel disengaged from the orbital station and set course for home, carrying the unlikely family toward their new life together, a human engineer, an Arcturian widow, and 3 children who would grow up bridging 2 worlds, embodying the potential of connection across the stars.